Comms, Andrew Zatlin. Andrew, welcome back.
Hey, Kerry, thank you for having me, and Happy New Year, everyone.
So, 2017, important year, important trends, important outcomes. Where do you see it?
This is going to be one for the books, and I think we have to give credit to Donald Trump. There's just no other way around it. I think he really is the man. He really is coming in and blowing away any positive expectation one could have had. There's just no other way to put it.
All right, so obviously, his most notable legislative accomplishment is the tax reduction bill, which if you're in New York and you make $500,000 a year more and you live in Manhattan, it's a massive tax increase bill, but that's the price you pay for living in the People's Republic of New York or California or Minnesota or Maine. All of these blue states, there's a couple of reds thrown in there too, Andy, are really going to take it on the chin. But for the people who've had the common sense to either stay away from those cesspits or to simply move out, it's going to be good for you, isn't it?
Kerry, I wish you'd quit dancing around what you really think, I wish you could just get straight to the point.
I'm that kind of guy, I have a hard time.
Let's put this in context if we can. Let's look at 2016, which kind of set the stage for what's going on. We were heading for a recession. If you look at the numbers in the middle of 2016 as we ran up into the election, the world economy was heading towards a recession. If Hillary had been elected, we would be firmly in a wicked recession right now. If you look at any number, any macroeconomic number, you will see that post-election, all of a sudden, it's just crazy positive, very bullish, very optimistic, and that's Trump. What we have is a business person coming into the office, not a lifetime politician or bureaucrat, a business person who's looking around and saying, this is madness. This is not how you run a country. I mean, when I was a kid, they used to read me a book by a guy named Shel Silverstein, The Tree. I don't remember the actual name of it, but it tells a story about this kid and the tree gives him fruit and branches. And after a while, the kids basically decimated the tree. The tree basically is dead. He's taken it. I don't know why they read that to me as a kid, but to me, that's sort of what we've been experiencing is you have this wonderful bounty that's just been plucked and plucked and plucked until it was almost dead. And that's what the political class has been doing for a couple decades, giving away everything. I mean, at the height of the election, we had Hillary saying, I'm going to forgive $1 trillion in student loans as she was trying to keep up with Bernie Sanders. I mean, basically, you had some real nonsense going on. We were destroying our economic fundamental infrastructure. And then you got a guy coming in and saying, no, I'm not going to do that. We're going to firm up our infrastructure. And he looked around and he said, we've got real infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt. We've got trade deals that are ridiculous, that are so one-sided against us, that are being taken advantage of. There's China off in the distance stealing our intellectual property. And for a decade, Obama's done nothing. What's going on here? So you have an adult finally stepping up and saying, I don't owe anyone anything. I'm independently wealthy. I'm not like the Clintons trying to get super rich. I'm not beholden to anybody. I'm going to come in and I'm going to set the course differently. And I think that's what we're seeing. After the first year, what do we have? We've got someone coming in and doing a lot of interesting things, but boom, we have a tax cut coming in. And unless you're on a fringe group, it's hard to argue that this is a bad thing. And then we've got this rolling thunder effect that Trump is doing, which is he's going to follow this with an infrastructure plan. What we have is essentially a discussion that probably took place earlier this year with Janet Yellen, where you've got a baton being handed off from monetary policy led by the Fed to fiscal policy led by Trump. And there must have been a discussion where he said, look, I want the Fed to support this. We can no longer continue with this madness of throwing out easy money and hoping it's going to trickle down. We need to have real productive economic change here. We need to really focus on some long-term gains, not the short-term, if I goose the rate a little bit, look at what happens. I sell a few more cars. And I think that Trumpflation has been very effective. Going forward, if he follows that up with another play beyond the tax cut, wow, you're talking about a decade. I mean, imagine redoing our bridges, roads, and all this great infrastructure. This is multi-year type of stuff. It takes years for this stuff to start and stop. This is a real game changer. And then meanwhile, he's looking around the world. He's pushing back on NATO saying, hey, how come you guys aren't spending money the way you're supposed to? How come? And you and I talked about this, Kerry, I recall last year, where we were talking about what's wrong with Donald Trump raising his hand and saying, we have a 70-year-old agreement in place, NATO. what's wrong with revisiting it and asking if it's serving the same purpose and goals from 70 years ago? There's nothing wrong with that. He was vilified by Hillary Clinton as saying we're abandoning our allies, where in fact, I think he's saying, no, agreements are always worth revisiting. NAFTA isn't doing what we thought it would do. Well, let's revisit it. Let's make it do what we want. We don't live and die for other countries. We're supposed to be about securing our own success. And if that helps other people, great. If we can all grow the pie together, that's great. But we're not interested in shrinking and falling apart. And I think that message has gone out to business, and they're seeing it in actuality.
Yeah, well, I'm going to make a prediction for the coming year, probably after the midterms, but I believe it's going to happen because, look, tax cuts always stimulate the economy. They're always a major boost for psychology. They eventually wind up bringing in more money into the tax man, but that's not their primary purpose by any stretch. I'm saying that he's going to go back probably after a midterm sweep, which I believe will happen because we're going to be in the midst of 4, maybe even 5% GDP growth. He will go back after the midterms, after it's even more favorably laid out for him, and he will go for another tax cut. And this will be really the tax cut that we should have had, but not the one that he was in a position to get for us. That is my prediction for 2018, 2019. Might run into 2019, but it's going to happen.
There you have it, folks. Bold prediction from Kerry.
And I'm the only one who's predicting this, too. You make a note of it. No one else has even thought of it. But Trump doesn't look at things. Congress looks at each battle as all-consuming and the only thing that's happening at the time. Trump, on the other hand, and I hate to use the analogy, the four-dimensional chess, well, the Democrats and Congress can barely get together with a modest game of Chinese checkers, but he is thinking about the war, not the battle. Congress only thinks about the battle. Trump always is looking at the bigger picture, and that's why this is going to happen, because you agree these tax cuts are further going to turbocharge the economy? Andrew?
Yeah, I think you ought to look at it in two ways. And both of them are longer term impactful than cutting rates or something like that. I mean, when you shift the game as much as he has through a tax cut, it's got a long-term impact, immediate and long-term. It's economic, but it has that political dimension, right? Can we talk politics? Right? Sure. He basically has just crushed the Democratic Party. These tax cuts go to solidifying his base, but it also goes to the folks who are on the fence a little bit. It's hard to hate a guy who just put money in your pocket, number one.
Yeah.
But number two, look at who's paying the price for the tax cut. California. You said it at the beginning.
Yeah, California.
What happens when you have a tax cut along the lines of reducing or eliminating the state and local taxes? So let's really talk about that. The reason California and New York are going to get hit is all of a sudden the people who live there aren't going to be able to deduct as much as they want to. So what that really means is they're going to spend less. So in California and New York, their economies are going to slow down because people won't have these massive deductions that they were enjoying. What does that mean? Well, it means that the tax revenues will start to stall. And all of a sudden, these people, I live in California, 10% tax rate, income tax.
13 if you're making over $1 million.
Yeah, sales tax is horrible. But what happens is the blowback, because people don't like to get less services given the high taxes that they're paying. And that's what's going to happen is this tax cut pushes back on local politicians in California and New York and basically slows down the amount of revenue coming in, which forces them to do the guns and butter decision. Do I cut services, and if so, which ones, or do I raise taxes? There will be a huge revolt if they raise taxes. So basically, the Democrats are in a bad place. They can't win. Either they raise taxes, which pisses off all their people, or they cut services, which pisses off all their people. So they're in a lose-lose situation. And that'll be interesting. I don't think Republicans are positioned right now with candidates to take over any local elections per se.
Definitely
but
not.
It definitely makes the populace resent the current administrations, the Democrats in power.
It's masterful.
That's really why the Democrats are upset, is they've been told you have to prioritize. And guess what? Your priorities are not going to be, this was great. Every year they publish this list of ridiculous funding grants.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I saw one where literally $100,000 was given to somebody to popularize, I think it was Hamlet. It was a Shakespeare play to wild animals. Literally, these people were running around in fields, not quoting, not performing, but just yelling out random Shakespearean quotes to wild animals. $100,000, right? So if you're forced to prioritize, those are the kind of things that probably won't happen. And we know that that's not exactly a place where the elected officials of California and New York want to be. They don't want to have to, California was just rated as having the worst teachers out there. I mean, come on, all this money that's being spent, the voters know that it's being misspent. Yeah. And all of a sudden, it's going to, it's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. So I think
total scam.
Going back to it, the tax cut has huge, visible, tangible benefits over the next couple of years. And it also has a very political impact as well. It's really bad for the Democrats. So I would predict, I can't predict what Trump is going to do per se, but I'm going to follow your prediction of a second tax cut. Don't know about that, but I will predict Trump will get reelected in a couple of years.
Yeah. Oh, well, that goes without saying.
If he wants to run.
Yeah, he'll be running because he won't be done yet. Look, what you said is 100% true. These studies, all this money they spend, like why do college students drink beer? Why do college students have sex? They spent millions of dollars to find this stuff out, and just go to any college dorm and the answer will become immediately apparent. We just keep wasting money, wasting it, and nobody's cared. So I have like another prediction for the coming year. There's this thing called the impoundment authority of the president, and that's his right to not spend money that's been appropriated. And up until 1974, that was basically an absolute right of the president. And then the Congress passed this Impoundment Act, which said you can impound the money, but we have to approve it within 45 days or it's a no-go. And there was a Supreme Court case kind of supported it, but the Supreme Court was a lot different in 74 than now. I believe he's going to be impounding left and right and daring them to go to court. And they probably will go to court. He might win, he might lose, but he's still not going to spend the money because he's got all these positions, Andrew, that are supposed to be filled, like the undersecretary, deputy assistant secretary for in the State Department for exterminating facilities. That requires an undersecretary. And he just said, what do we need to fill this for? It's a BS position. It's a total political plum. And I don't need that guy. If I got to get rid of bugs in the State Department, I'll hire an exterminator. I don't need a deputy undersecretary for extermination affairs.
Well, let's use the EPA as an example, right? Where you've had, what's the latest figure? 30% of the EPA staff are no longer there.
700, almost 800 people have fled the axe. And
let's talk about that for a second, because, the EPA is, I have mixed feelings because I think the EPA does do some good things. However, we've seen examples of every regulatory body has that revolving door where they go into industry. We've seen Monsanto and others take advantage of the EPA to get stuff passed by hiring ex-EPA officials. So while the EPA, I think, is supposed to do good, it's one of those entities that's, hey, it's like a Peace Corps. It's supposed to do good. I think it has been subverted in some ways, and it doesn't always do what it's supposed to do. And then there's the typical, bureaucratic overreach expansion. So within that context, I'm kind of bummed that some of the things that the EPA stands for are going to get hollowed out. But at the same time, I came across this case of one guy who left early on, the sort of the rats leaving the sinking ship kind of a thing, where you have that tectonic shift where the EPA is going to be told, look, let's go back to basics. What's our mission? It's a businessman's viewpoint. What's our mission? How are we fulfilling it? And where have we kind of strayed in scope creep? Well, this guy left, and this is where I think the EPA failure is epitomized. His job was titularly supposed to help local communities deal with basically factories coming in. The EPA, there could be some hazardous waste. There could be, some pollution and stuff. And so the local communities were supposed to help navigate these waters. Now, let's go back in time to places like, and I'm going to be explosive here, very, very extreme, I think. Let's talk Ferguson, where unemployment is so deep. This is an area, remember Ferguson had the riots. You had huge unemployment. What's going on there was also a community where businesses were not locating. And there were many reasons why. You have a guy at the EPA whose job is to help communities, attract business. But what was going on was actually he subverted that. He was actually going out and saying, hey, why is it that businesses locate in low income areas and they create pollution? We need to fight businesses coming in. So the point here, Kerry, is you had a Ferguson that needed businesses coming in, and you've got people out at the EPA helping them keep businesses from coming in. And that's sort of the opposite of what should be going on, where, wait a second, if you want to attract business, you need to know that businesses coming in are coming in primarily because land is super cheap where you are. And let's face it, they are going to do some things that are going to add some amount of hazardous waste or some amount of pollution, but that's what factories do. So you're not going to attract Google into your backyard. You're going to attract, what are your resources that are going to be appealing to businesses? The fact is you've got cheap infrastructure, cheap land. And that's labor. A place to start. And yet labor. You had people at the federal level blocking that. Mm-hmm. And I looked at that and said, oh my God, this is insane. Why are people who are supposed to help communities advance actually at the end of the day harming them and preventing them from creating a tax base that's going to help them advance? And I believe that, I tie Ferguson to that because Ferguson, that's what's going on is you have such high unemployment. Well, why do you have high unemployment when you're surrounded by a huge industrial area? Because they weren't welcoming in businesses. Why? Because you have people at the federal level who were basically championing the inner city and saying, you shouldn't put a factory here. We're going to protect you from the evils of factories. Well, how does that help? What does that advance? And so, I look at this as saying by going back to basics and saying the EPA, your job is to make sure that, we're not going down a path where there's going to be a lot of pollution. How is it that you have the EPA in there and yet you have, the water being so foul in places where the EPA is supposed to be active? Focus on that stuff first. Focus on the basics, and then we can talk about the rest of this.
I couldn't agree with you more. And so let's talk about 2018, Andrew. What do you see happening?
All right, so we got back to basics president. We got someone who's clear-headed coming in and saying, what do we want as a country? And what he's recognized is, going back to Roman times, your success is going to be determined by your economic base. So with that in mind, let's take this 3-year view. 2016 was a bad year. Everyone predicted Hillary getting elected, and that was clearly not economically positive. You had the economy really just going into a tailspin. Trump gets elected. A lot of this year, a lot of 2017 is really sort of the response to the weakness of 2016. Now, the reason I kind of raise those two is you have all these wonderful macroeconomic data points coming out, especially if you look year over year. Well, guess what? Those comparables, or comps as they're often referred to, actually are going to be part of the negative narrative next year, because you're going to start comparing yourself to this Trumpflation. As we go deeper into 2018, you're going to have all this strong growth from 2017 that we got to compare ourselves to. And so you're going to start to see a little bit of a slowdown on a year-over-year basis. But again, let's keep it in perspective. It's still strong growth. It's just, wow, it's like a baseball game where you're comparing yourself to the first couple of innings where everyone was getting a home run and you're only getting singles and doubles. It's still a great game. If he follows through, though, with a part 2, this infrastructure plan, that'll save the year. That'll push it up even higher. The tax cut is going to push it up. So while I say, hey, you know what, you've got this tough comps part of the narrative, we can get beyond that. The trajectory can still shift in 2018 with the tax cuts. One concern I have now, let me break out some of the risks going in. One concern I have is, did everybody spend that tax cut already? Probably not. But a healthy chunk was spent because wages really aren't accelerating that much, still going at about a 4% year over year rate, as they have been for a couple of years. You're not seeing a lot of oomph in wages. And I think that's because no company wants to start giving huge raises. They don't want to, because once they do, then everybody's going to pile in. And so companies are incredibly profitable right now, but they still don't want to share with employees. And so you still have this break of how much money's coming in. If you look at the spending over the past couple of months, it's been strong, but it's also been coming not from the wages part of the equation, but coming from the savings part. People are dipping into their savings to keep their quality of life going. And that's never a good thing, unless they're doing it because they expect more money to flow. So you have this cycle, this virtuous cycle possibly kicking in. I'm raising my hand and saying we got to make sure it's a virtuous cycle, because dipping into your savings is not a long-term proposition. You do it only because you do expect those wages to start to rebound and accelerate. And I think that's actually where we're going to be. But that's one risk, is that wages don't accelerate. People dipped into their savings and, oh my, they're not feeling good. I personally think that we're going to see some positives. The tax cuts are going to be so much more positive than people think, and they're going to have more of a long-term boom, long-term benefit. Mm-hmm. The second thing I'm watching is hiring. We just had jobless claims. They're kind of range bound around 240K. Reason I mention that is, again, there's sort of a before 2018 and after 2018 effect here. As we're coming in, that tax cut hasn't changed hiring yet. And so we got the current trajectory. The current trajectory, 240K is our initial jobless claims level. That's almost what we were doing last year. So if we look at it from a year-over-year level, this is not good. This is exactly the formula that is the precursor to a recession. When your jobless claims this year are the same as they were last year, that means the economy isn't really growing. Now that's trajectory before tax cut, before 2018. I suspect that as we go into 2018, jobless claims will again start to fall back down into the 230, possibly even 220 range. I mean, historically unplumbed levels. And I say that because, again, tax cuts throw money into the economy, even if it's just restaurant. You're going to have less fire and so on and so forth. So as we go in, I think you're going to have this repeat of all assets are going to be bid up. Stock market's going to go crazy again because companies are going to be hugely profitable. I don't think every company is going to be hugely profitable. Companies like a Goldman Sachs that said, geez, man, we're going to be $5 billion less profitable because of this. Oh, well, my heart's going out to you, Goldman. Let me cry you a tear. But I think for the most part, builders, anyone connected to infrastructure, especially engineering, you're going to see they've been beaten down in the stock market. I think you're going to see some of that come back. I think the consumers, especially cyclicals and especially the non-cyclicals, so where the fun money goes, I think you're going to see them pile up again and move up. I think the stock market's going to get another win. And why? Let's face it, Kerry, at the end of the day, the stock market has one huge buyer, and that's the 401k plan. And as long as jobs are growing and as long as wages are growing, people will put more money into their 401ks, and it's just looking for a place to park itself. And with oil up as well, you've got Saudi Arabia and Norway and all these other sovereign wealth countries that benefit from high oil prices. They're going to park money somewhere, and it's the U.S. stock market where they put it. So I look at the U.S. stock market as being a great place to be, but I also look at every asset. Look at gold. Gold's back.
And it's up today. As long as you happen to mention gold, we should talk about that a little bit, at least. Up $10.30. Now it's back down to $8.40 the ounce. It's
Look
trading
at this thing, man.
1304.
Since we were talking about it, silver and gold have fallen. What's up, man? Are we that powerful?
Yeah. Hey, we move markets, Andrew. You and me, we move markets. And don't forget it. We have power. So 2018, it's going to be a year of surprises to everyone except you and I, Andrew. I mean, let's just say if there's a war, hey, all bets are off, or maybe it'll be good for the economy. Who knows? And if Inspector Robert Clouseau Mueller actually gets his man, then we have to reevaluate. There's other things that can happen too, of course. I mean, quakes, natural disasters, but we made it
not to be bullied.
Yeah, but we made it through 3 major world-class hurricanes. I mean, I'm glad I don't live in Puerto Rico. I really feel for the people who do, and will help them in any way possible. Houston's on the rebound, and the rest of it, hey, it's working the way it should.